So in this video, I will cover Microeconomics Basics and also the Production Possibilities Frontier. So the study of economics is the study of how societies use scarce resources, the factors of production, to produce goods and services to satisfy unlimited human wants and needs. So there are three main societal choices that society must address using economics. The first is what the economy is going to produce. So this includes hairstyling services, shampoo, conditioner, or hair dye. A business might decide to offer that, and that is a choice that they make. The second question is how the service or good will be produced. So what sort of production will be best for them? A big consideration is capital versus labor. So would it be better to have machines produce it or humans? So paper bags are often mass produced, but counseling services and psychology services are usually offered by humans because they're more efficient at it. And finally, the last question is for whom the economy is going to produce for. So in microeconomics, this question is usually determined by market forces, as the people who have higher wealth, who have higher income, will be able to buy more goods. In market economies, supply-demand forces decide these three questions, whereas in command economy, the government decides. Moving on to factors of production. So there are four main factors of productions: land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. So land talks about natural resources like fresh water and minerals. So the profit that is associated with owning the land is considered rent. So land gives rent. The second one is labor, which is jobs. So examples of labor are lawyers, farmers, teachers, and the payment that is associated with owning labor is wage. So if you own labor, you'll get wage. Third is capital. So these are machines like factories, bread machines, bakeries. You get interest or dividends as payment for owning capital. And lastly, entrepreneurship. These are business owners who use their own entrepreneurship skills and take the risks in return. And the payment for having entrepreneurship is called profit. So land gives rent, labor gives wage, capital gives interest or dividends, and entrepreneurship gives profit. Now, entrepreneurship is not the value of one's time, that is labor. Entrepreneurship is simply the risks and the mental capacity, I guess, of starting a business or just taking a venture, being an entrepreneur, basically. So micro versus macro. There are two main strands of economics, microeconomics versus macroeconomics. So microeconomics, meaning small, micro meaning small, talks about the smaller aspects of the economy, like individual households, firms, and markets. Macroeconomics is the opposite and measures the overall activity in the economy. So that includes inflation, unemployment, GDP growth, and distribution of income. Positive versus normative. So there are two ways to approach economics, positive or normative. Positive is based on facts, whereas normative is based on opinion, value expressions, beliefs. So an example of a positive statement is the economy has grown by 2% last year. And a normative statement would be corruption in the government is a big problem. So economics is a social science, even though it uses math. So why? First off, it studies human behavior. How do people use their money? How do people make their buying choices, their buying behavior, and how does it change? It is affected by human behavior and value systems, which means it changes a lot. So compared to something like chemistry or physics, it changes too much because human attitudes are too unpredictable. So that makes it a social science. And however, it still uses the scientific method in terms of problem, assumption, theory, and testing. Ceteris paribus is Latin to mean all else equal. Economics studies the effect of changing one variable on a second variable. You can't change multiple variables at once to find a change. So ceteris paribus is just assuming everything else except for the one variable you're changing is equal. Free goods are goods that are relatively abundant, like air, salt water, or maybe dirt. You can't set a price on them because there's so much of it around that there's no point. So economics only deals with economic goods, and economic goods are goods with scarcity as a factor. That there are 5 types of main market structures that IB will cover: perfect competition, monopoly, oligopoly, monopolistic competition, and monopsony. So perfect competition is where market demand and supply determines the cost of the product. There are a large amounts of consumers and producers, and all the producers offer an identical product. So all products are considered perfect substitutes for one another. No one producer or consumer has a big influence in this market, and consumers are perfectly informed about the product that they are buying. In this market, it's easy to leave or enter, which means it has low barriers of entry and low barriers of exit. A good example would be agricultural markets, like a potato or a carrot market. A monopoly is where there is only one producer of a good, and that product has no close substitutes. The producer determines the price of the good, and there are high barriers to entry, so it is not easy for another firm to enter the market. And that is the case with most utilities providers like water or electricity. An oligopoly is like a monopoly in that there are a few firms that dominate the market. However, the difference is that there are a few firms instead of one firm. So without government intervention, these firms can set prices if they cooperate with each other. OPEC is an example. Monopolistic competition is not monopoly. It's just monopolistic, which means something else entirely. And it is a market in where there are many producers and consumers, but the products that the producers offer are not substitutes for each other. Some producers can sell their products at a higher price than others, and this is also the market that is the most common in our daily lives, like burger chains, art, and some artists, like the ones that are more well known, can sell their art for higher prices than amateur artists. And finally, a monopsony is a market where there's only one single consumer of a product. And product in this case can also mean service. So in practice, monopsonies usually happen when there is one employer and this one consumer has incredibly large influence over the price of the product. So one example would be like teaching. The school board in some areas are the only school boards available, or the biggest one, and they employ all of the teachers, so they have a large control. Okay, so that's it for basics, and now for opportunity costs and the production's possibilities frontier. You'll sometimes find it called the production possibility frontier. So opportunity cost is the cost of any economic activity which is measured in terms of the best alternative foregone. So an example would be toothbrushes and combs. If a factory uses all of its resources on toothbrushes, it can produce, say, 500. However, if they want to produce 100 hair combs, then the number of toothbrushes it produces has to decrease. Let's say from 500 to 480. The loss of 20 toothbrushes here is opportunity cost, and there aren't enough resources to produce both 500 toothbrushes and 100 combs. So the opportunity cost of producing that 100 combs is the 20 toothbrushes that you lose. So it sounds simple, but make sure that you never ever measure opportunity cost in terms of a currency like dollars. Even if one toothbrush was $1, the opportunity cost of one comb, you can't measure that in dollars. You have to measure it in toothbrushes. So there's a lot of increasing opportunity costs, which states that not all resources are equally efficient in all lines of production. So, which means resources are biased towards certain products. So a cake factory can't efficiently produce medical masks and vice versa. Now, this has implications for opportunity costs. As we can see previously, the resources for hair combs are different from the resources for toothbrushes, so it is hard to convert toothbrush plastic into hair comb plastic. So that is what is meant by the fact that resources favor a particular good. So this leads us to production possibilities frontier. So although this is microeconomics as it's dealing with production, this is a macro diagram. So it looks at the entire economy and not just individual households, firms, or markets. It shows the combinations of production possibilities with available resources, assuming that there's only two goods in the market, one per axis. You could theoretically have a 3D graph and that would have three goods. Just make sure that you consider it as in terms of the axes. So also make sure that they never turn inwards. You can't, because of the law of increasing opportunity costs, you can never have the frontier turn inwards like that. That's just a big no-no. Make sure you're labeling the diagram as much as possible. Make sure the axes are labeled, and if it's not labeled, there are some common combinations like goods A and B, capital consumer goods, public and private goods. Those are just used to demonstrate shifting in some cases, because you can just give two generic goods and the shifting will affect it no matter what goods they are. So here's an example of carrots and butter. If you want to show the law of increasing opportunity cost here, so the prediction possibilities frontier is the combination of all points that lie on the of all the possible combinations, apparently. These points should be spaced equally apart on the x-axis, and as you move up along the prediction possibilities frontier, the distance between the y values actually increase. So the distance between the production possibilities frontier and y0 is less than the distance between y0 and y1. Even though you're increasing the production of butter the same amount as you had initially, x1 is the same distance away from x0 as x0 is from the y-axis. Now this shows that you sacrifice more and more carrots if you want to produce more butter, ceteris paribus. So that's just a graphical representation of the law of increasing opportunity cost. So to shift the PPF, make sure you draw arrows and labels and refer to those labels in your explanations.